For myself and many others, the idea of another clan-based MechWarrior game has been a 29-year-long pipe dream. With the recent release of MechWarrior 5 Clans though, that dream has finally been given a chance, offering the possibility of all of us reliving our younger days when we fought for either Clan Wolf or Clan Jade Falcon during the Refusal War, and if you played the expansion, you'd have played as Clan Ghost Bear. Instead of merely battling other clans though, Piranha Games has dangled the carrot of participating in one of the biggest events in Battletech, Operation Revival, also known as the Clan Invasion. Today, we are going to talk about MechWarrior 5 Clans, a game that's garnering numerous positive reviews from both players and critics. I'll discuss what I like, what I dislike, and whether or not I believe its favourable reviews are deserved, or if people are just viewing the game through rose-tinted glasses, and the game journos obviously just writing their usual dribble. Just to let you guys know though, early on, there will be some spoilers and some clan slang which I will do my best to explain as simply as I can. But before we continue, please consider taking a moment to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video or any other content on my channel. As always, I appreciate the support. Getting stuck into our story, we follow Jaden, a true-born warrior of Clan Smoke Jaguar who is on the brink of his trial of position. We discover that his meager group of 4 friends is all that remain alive of his Sibco. Now, a Sibco is a small group of clan individuals who are usually born together and they are trained and brought up together to fulfill their respective roles in clan society, in this particular instance, MechWarriors. It is, however, at this unfortunate point that my own issues begin to surface. As in this initial cutscene, we get introduced to our remaining Civkin, who largely I'll ignore for now since most are fairly irrelevant. However, I do want to bring up the one in particular. Liam is a character who sticks out like dog's nuts. He is constantly in trouble for using contractions, which is a shortening of words, but it's largely considered disrespectful and unbecoming, except amongst the lowest castes of clan society. You would be forgiven for thinking that he is maybe a character designed solely to break up the rigid, monotonous language that's used in cutscenes and conversations throughout the clan. However, in a game centered on one of the strictest clans regarding the caste system, it's pretty jarring. He receives numerous warnings to correct his behavior, and I can only imagine that had he actually used this language during his Sibco trials, he wouldn't have made it based on that reason alone. Yet, throughout the story, he's only seriously reprimanded once. This authority figure who does the reprimanding actually tells Jaden that in no uncertain terms, the entire group will be punished if Liam doesn't pull his head in. Behind the back of this person though, in the field, on private channels, he returns to using this language, and is eventually promoted by this authority figure into a role outside of the group that is shielding him from the consequences of his actions. It's very early on explained away as him being some kind of angsty kid that's really upset at his upbringing, but he's 20 years old at this time and he's been born and trained to be a warrior. It's nonsensical, it's immersion breaking, and honestly it detracts from the game's premise of true canonical storytelling. Jumping back off that soapbox though and moving on to our trial of position, we are locked into a mech we can't modify prior to undertaking it. While I personally don't mind the summoner platform, I absolutely wouldn't use the prime configuration in a trial of position. It's not a good configuration for a brawl. Furthermore, what transpires in the trial is not actually how the clans conduct the trials. I won't go into details as it's quite deep and extensive, but none of it is canonically correct. If you are interested in learning more though, I will share a link in the description detailing how these trials are conducted. By the third mission, a mere 20 minutes into the game, the story is beginning to fray. As the story progresses, issues continue to snowball anytime it tries to stray away from canonical lore. This comes to a head during the final missions where you either continue to fight with Clan Smoke Jaguar or defect to the Wolf's Dragoons for the Battle of Luthien. Regardless of which faction you side with, you have access to any and all clan equipment you could desire, which to the best of my knowledge, the Dragoons just did not have, only coming back for their reconnaissance mission with Star League era relics. And they didn't actually have any clan equipment until after the Battle of Luthien when they were able to salvage vast amounts of it. I do admit though that I could be wrong about this particular aspect of the lore. If I am, please let me know in the comments below. The inconsistent storytelling is my only issue with the game. Character building also seems to be absent, with most characters devolving instead. We frequently see Jaden, our character, hesitating to do what needs to be done despite Clan Smoke Jaguar's principles being built on strength. Even when members of his group step up and make choices, and even encourage him to act in the clan's best interest, he instead insists on being a coward and falling back on inaction. This narrative choice appears to be intended to lead you towards defecting to the Dragoons later in the game, as the story drip feeds you pieces of humanity into a society built on the might makes right principle. This pattern isn't limited to Jaden though. Ezra, another member of the group, transforms from a true-born warrior into a pathetic, whiny little child following a single event. The shift is infuriating and it causes a serious plot sinkhole later on in the story. Seriously, fuck Ezra. He is a horrible, horrible character. Moving past the haphazard mess that is the story and character development though, I must give credit where it's due. The game offers a fairly good representation of the Jaguars' invasion corridor, and I genuinely do enjoy one of the characters who joins our squad later, Yuichi. However, before I do lump too much praise on here, I do have more glaring issues. The game abruptly stops before Tukid, which is the biggest blue ball for a game centered around the clan invasion. It's widely known that DLC will likely cover the Battle of Tukid, but the omission of this crucial battle from the base game is frustrating and seems typical of PGI's strategy of releasing only a fraction of a game, followed by later DLCs in the hope that they can complete the experience. Keyword is hope, as PGI tends to be beyond lazy with their content release schedule. Just take a look at how long it took them to get all of MechWarrior 5 Mercenaries DLCs out. The mech roster is also significantly lacking. Only a small number of the chassis available during the time period can be utilized, making the progression system feel painfully linear. Players progress from the Mistlinks more or less straight to the Direwolf in a tedious 5-ton step process with zero room for deviation, making it a drab and boring experience when you unlock mech after mech. Moving on to the real elephant in the room though, let's address the mech lab and the Omnipod system. In MechWarrior Online, PGI had a fairly workable mech lab. It was clean, simple, and pretty easy to navigate. Unfortunately, in MechWarrior Mercenaries, they redesigned the wheel into something overly complicated, which modders did eventually fix, thankfully, via a mod called Yet Another Mech Lab. In MechWarrior 5 Clans, however, they've discarded this already flawed wheel and once again tried to reinvent it, resulting in a cumbersome and nonsensical interface. It now takes far longer to swap a single component than it does to rebuild an entire mech in MechWarrior Mercenaries, which is frankly ridiculous. Clearly, whoever designed the system never bothered to actually use it and see if it worked. That though is only the tip of the iceberg, because when it comes to the Omnipod system, PGI has doubled down on the design from MechWarrior Online, which they used for balance purposes, but it's been made even worse. Although players can swap the Omnipods around, so bits and pieces, the arms, the shoulders, the center torso, to some degree, many configurations simply cannot be recreated due to the stringent restrictions that are placed on these pods. These mechanics are frustratingly inferior compared to what we even had in MechWarrior Mercenaries on Soul Battle mechs, and a night and day behind the customizations offered to us in MechWarrior Online, lacking even as that is. Even the old fundamental problems from the old games, such as the LBX autocannons being hardlocked as weapon types, rather than allowing for changeable ammo types in combat, forcing you to make the decision before heading into battle as to whether you want cluster or solid slug. Thankfully though, modders did resolve this in MechWarrior Mercenaries, and I have no doubt that they will fix it again if they ever do decide they want to work on MechWarrior Clans. Long-range missiles also don't act like the direct-fire weapons that the clan variant should be. It instead appears to follow a slight arc, which is what the inner sphere versions of the missiles do. This, to me, it looks like it's just plain laziness on behalf of the development team. They didn't want to make two different types of missiles, and they just threw everything in the one basket. Dropships such as the Old Leopard, which you would be accustomed with if you played MechWarrior Mercenaries, and the new clan Broadsword, no longer also have weapons on them, which is bizarre. It's a huge step back from MechWarrior Mercenaries, and there's actually a mission where you have to retreat from an assault lance before they destroy your broadsword, which doesn't have any weapons on it to defend itself. It's really a bizarre design choice that I just do not understand. Initially though, to its credit, the game does make you feel quite powerful. You can pick off enemies from quite a long distance using the clan's superior weapon ranges, which is how it's supposed to be. However, as the game continues, as all things do, the fast is shown when enemies are either dropped in on your head or spawn in well within their own weapon ranges. This basically leads to every engagement turning into a chaotic brawl that requires large bore autocannons or just vast amounts of firepower to overcome. Given the dozens of enemies that are thrown at you during missions, this design choice seems incredibly nonsensical, especially considering the map designs of the original MechWarrior Mercenaries game, where you saw most things coming well outside of your weapon ranges in the thousands of meters. Why they decided to design it this way, I have no idea. It ultimately ends up feeling claustrophobic, and it undermines the whole premise of the clan's superior technology. Another personal issue I had lies in the limited number of repair bays during missions. While I was playing it on the hardest difficulty setting, damage was an inevitability, but typically the game provides you only 2 or 3 repair bays, which makes little sense, given that an inner sphere lance typically consists of 4 mechs. Logic would suggest then that mech repair bays should appear in groups of 4. Or at least so you'd think. Regarding the tactical overlay map, though, which was heavily promoted in all the trailers and which I was asked about a lot during my playthrough, I can see it becoming a great mod in the future, given the mod which turned MechWarrior Mercenaries into a Mech Commander game. However, the problem is that MechWarrior Clans is a first-person shooter. Opening that overlay exposes you to enemy fire. Any strategy involving that overlay must be conducted prior to engaging in combat, and since enemies are often spawned on your head, this feature pretty much becomes useless unless you're replaying a mission and you know exactly where things are going to come in. Visually too, the game is like many other titles that run on Unreal Engine 5, grainy, fuzzy, and disgusting. Even on the highest graphic settings, the mechs look woeful by comparison to their appearance and the near-decade-old Crytek engine used in MechWarrior Online. The missiles still resemble oversized Nerf darts, and the new laser effects feel more at home in some generic sci-fi B-movie than the established MechWarrior universe. The sound effects also fall flat. In many instances, you just don't feel like you're in a war machine, but instead, you're a kid playing with the little lights and sounds Transformers toy. It's disheartening to see PGI literally throwing away the assets they already had from MechWarrior Online and just replacing them with what this has devolved into. Adding to the frustrations, despite 2 patches, though I could swear there's been more, the control scheme fails to save, which forces you to rebind your keys every time you start the game. At one point, you couldn't even unbind or overwrite keybinds, which was the most amazing experience. Additionally, there were instances of the wrong cutscenes playing, something I can't confirm it's been resolved, as I'm honestly unwilling to replay the game due to its entire lack of replayability. It's also worth noting that players didn't receive their Collector's Edition content until a week after purchasing the game, which included the exclusive Timberwolf Omnipod setup that I personally never got to use. Furthermore, many of the technical readouts displayed artwork for mechs other than the ones currently being viewed, which I'm unsure if this is intentional or not, but it's probably not. All in all, while the game does manage to tell a fairly good story, it does feel as though 90% of the budget was allocated to writing this story, leaving the remaining aspects poorly executed. Many of the problems that existed in MechWarrior Mercenaries remain unresolved, further solidifying my belief that the budget was primarily spent on writing rather than development. In conclusion, MechWarrior 5 Clans is a game that most players will likely only play through once. Toying with a simulator, which allows you to replay previously completed missions, but even that gets boring really quickly. It does manage to draw you in with some nostalgic elements, engaging gameplay and storytelling. This only lasts early on. It quickly turns from an amazing Clans experience to a thoughtless plot and a repetitive grinding gameplay loop. The game absolutely feels overpriced at $73 Australian, which, given the collector's edition comes in at $117, feels entirely unjustified, particularly if you consider that players didn't receive that collector's edition content until a week later, long after the majority had probably finished the game. For such a short-sighted product, which has absolutely no replayability, I would honestly expect to pay no more than $50, and certainly not an additional $44 for a collector's edition, which I honestly don't feel is worth the investment, especially with modders that are likely going to fix the Omnipod system, which will make the Timberwolf variant redundant. The technical readouts are all readily available on Sana for free, which gives far more information, and the soundtrack honestly isn't anything to write home about. It's also worth noting that the extra content is only accessible while the game's open. Ultimately, it is a game worth playing, just not at the moment. My advice is to wait. Hold off until you see it on sale for at least 15% off or more, and hope that the modding community has maybe started work on it and have addressed the problems with the game by then. But anyway, that's all from me. I hope this helped you decide whether or not you would or wouldn't like to get MechWarrior 5 Clans. Leaving a like and subscribing would be greatly appreciated if you made it through this far, and I hope to catch you guys next time.